Hear these words from John chapter 18. We're in verses 12 through 27, and we're picking up just at the end of the arrest. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leader that it would be good if one man died for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because the disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside of the door. The other disciple, who was the one who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of these man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. "I am not," he replied. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with him, warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. "I've spoken openly to the world," Jesus replied. "I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you address the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it. At that moment, a rooster began to crow. There are many moments in that Last Supper celebration and the events preceding it and immediately following it that could be considered those dramatic, climactic times that bring the narrative to some type of a head. Last week, we saw one of those with the foot washing and how Jesus transformed this act of taking care of his disciples in this great reversal of power and service. Later, we see the debate at the table amongst the disciples, wondering who will do what next. Who's the most important? How will they follow Jesus into the next stages? And what will that next step in the revolution resemble? We hear Peter boldly proclaiming at that same table that he would die with Jesus if need be. And we hear Jesus chastise him and say, "You don't know what you're saying." And then we recognize at the end here the betrayal by Judas, the guards coming and seizing Jesus, and Peter fighting back, but being told to stop and to put away his sword. And Jesus is led away. Now he's led to a conversation with Annas. Annas was a former chief priest and now is the father-in-law of the current chief priest. It isn't exactly a trial. It's a very uncomfortable conversation where Jesus is being set up to fail at the trial. And the one disciple whom Jesus loved, who we assume is the disciple John, is with Peter, and the two of them try to follow Jesus and stay close to the whole situation. In the midst of this conversation, we see Peter denying that he knows Jesus, which seems so inconsequential. But it's more than just denying he knows him. It is assuming that he is not culpable as a member of this particular revolution, that he's not one of Jesus' chief disciples and apostles, that he's not able to take up the mantle of leadership and go forward. He's denying he had anything to do with it. We see the interplay there of Jesus' conversation next to Peter's. We see examples of how faithful men, women, and children might face adversity, challenges, and moments of conscience. For Jesus, we see one who offers all of himself. He risks everything, even his own life, for what he believes and for those he's called to serve. In Peter, we see one who's unwilling to take a step out in risky faith and instead decides to save his own skin in the sake of that particular moment. Peter's denial shows how very easy it is to lose heart and to give up when we are threatened. This is a man who previously insisted he would do anything for Jesus. He was Jesus' right-hand man throughout this whole experience of teaching, of preaching, and of serving, and of healing. Peter has seen miraculous things, things that should change any person who observes them. But Peter seems to be all talk and very little action. His identity is the antithesis of Jesus' own identity. And in this gospel, we see it played out. Jesus often says, I am the great shepherd. I am the vine. I am. And it certainly plays off of the Old Testament identification of Yahweh. I am who I am. And we see instead of Peter saying, I am a follower of Jesus, saying, I am not. It's brilliantly written, even in the rhetoric that's used here by the author of the gospel. It's asked in the negative to allow Peter the opportunity not to answer with a negative, but he still does anyway. It just flies in the face of what Jesus has said throughout this entire gospel. I am not. That's the answer that Peter gives every time. And while Judas betrays Jesus, Judas seems to do it because he's upset that Jesus is not going far enough to help the poor. Judas does it and receives some payment, but his motivation we see earlier in the gospel is based on one who sees that the movement is not going in the direction it should, thinks it's not going far enough, and wants to change the course of the revolution. While it is a betrayal and it is a sin, I think it's a very limited one compared to what Peter does. Peter's betrayal is haunting to me. Peter's betrayal is the equivalent of someone who loves you very much saying something awful to you, as opposed to the stranger who critiques you. I don't mind when someone I don't know says something bad about my preaching, my leadership, my abilities as a husband or father. They don't know me. But when someone I love says that about me, it hurts. And Peter's denial sticks with us. I ask you, though, how much better would any of us done if we were forced to make that type of confession of faith that we think might lead to our own death, to our martyrdom, to our suffering even before death, to a loss of a job or a loss of a family? As I reflect over my time as a minister of word and sacrament, I cannot help but admit how very little adversity I have faced in my confession of Jesus Christ as Lord, and certainly as the minister here at the People's Church of East Lansing. I have experienced the opposite of persecution, especially in this town, regardless of what others might say about being a Christian in these very difficult times. That's garbage. If you're a Christian here at East Lansing, you are part of the in crowd. We are the majority. We are the ones who have power. We're the ones who are treated well. And as a white, male, straight, middle-class, Midwestern Christian, I've got everything. And I haven't suffered for any of those marks. In fact, I go so far as to say I'm treated better in this community simply because of my position as a leader at the People's Church. Politicians, professors, neighbors, friends, even Crunchies gives me a free beer from time to time because I walk in with my clerical. And when I wear my clerical collar, people see me and know what I stand for, know that I'm a pastor, but I am by no means suffering for it. There are certain places in town that will be nicer to me than otherwise they would be, simply because they know I'm a Christian. There's very little to risk in admitting my faith. And so I have to wonder, as I have before, what would I say if I did have to lose something? If there was the potential of admitting my faith and losing my job, of not having the esteem of my neighbors, of not being considered a leader in our community, would I be willing to risk? Would any of us be willing to risk if we knew that we might lose something because we were treated differently as followers of Jesus Christ? Peter denies Jesus so very easily and so very quickly. More than that, all of the apostles seem to. Afterwards, when we have the resurrection and Jesus goes and finds them back on the shore fishing, it's only a couple of days. These erstwhile revolutionaries give up so very quickly, and they go back to their old life as though this was just a summer camp that they were experiencing. And, well, we had some good times and good memories, but it's time to go back to work now, and fall is here. Jesus finds them on the shore. They seem to have given up. They blend back into their regular day-to-day. Now, we know that's not how the story ends. Peter and the apostles do eventually trust and regain their willingness to lead, but not right away. In that moment, they turn and they run. They deny everything that they were a part of. Peter, who will become the great rock of the church, this first bishop of Rome, converts thousands of people, baptizes them, preaches, but not right then. Right then he fails. When driving with the youth group a few weeks back, I found myself driving the van because, and I'm only going to pick on him a little bit, our outstanding youth minister, Joseph Kennedy, is a younger man who is not allowed to drive the church vans because of our insurance. He's not quite old enough yet. Which means we need drivers this summer to take our youth out to South Dakota so that Joe can be a good youth minister and accompany them. And if you feel that you are called to drive to South Dakota this summer, Joe would love to talk to you. I got to drive for the ski trip and sat in the very front seat driving, and Joseph Kennedy sat right next to me, keeping me company, while there were about a dozen or so kids behind us in the back seat. And because we were the grown-ups in the car, there was one other who was trying to blend in and pretend she was younger. Sorry, Jody, you're just like us. We got to pick the music. So we're going to pick, obviously, things that teenagers don't want to listen to, and we embrace that opportunity. So we talk about the songs that meant something to us, the things that we enjoyed, and Joe went back and forth with me talking about which song we wanted to pick and what we were going to listen to, and we discovered a common theme for the two of us. While we have an age difference of about 15, 16 years, we both, in our teenage years, fell in love with the music of Bob Dylan, which I know is so unique among 16-year-old boys in high school. But Bob Dylan spoke in a way that probably spoke to the generation before me as well, and spoke to Joe, and will speak to the ones afterwards, as a young man who heard in the voice of this Northwoods troubadour all the things I wanted to say over 3 chords and 3 verses. And in particular, we found one song that we both loved and brought up all the feels for us. It Ain't Me, Babe. Anybody, any young man in particular who has struggled to live up to the expectations of a girlfriend, a wife, a whatever, should fall in love with this song at one point or another. Because it's Bob Dylan repeating all of these things. You say you want me to be strong and not weak. You say you want me to hold the door open for you. You say you want me to defend you no matter what. It ain't me, babe. No. It ain't me. It ain't me you're looking for. And Joe and I reflected over past relationships and talked about why this spoke to us. And I left it at that because I'd always just listened to that song very literally. I didn't actually know the background until getting ready for this particular week. I should have probably understood, but Bob Dylan, like many of his songs, was speaking about something that wasn't as direct or literal. This is a man in the mid-60s who was being looked at to be the voice of the generation around him, to be the folk singer leader who would say all of the things that the young people wanted him to say, to be the revolutionary who would lead them, who would guide them to something better. And he responds and says, no, it ain't me, babe. I'm not willing to die for this movement. I don't want to be identified as your leader. I don't want to say things that you think are going to be meaningful or political. I just want to play my guitar and leave me alone. It ain't me. Now, he had a chance to lead right there and very consciously said, I deny that opportunity. When Jesus was arrested, Peter was next in line to take the mantle of leadership, and he was unwilling to take it. Aren't you the one who was with him in the garden? No, it ain't me, babe. Are you the one who was a follower of his in Galilee? No, it ain't me you're looking for. Aren't you the one who defended him with your sword? No, it ain't me, babe. It ain't me you're looking for. And yet that same Peter will become the one who steps up. But right then he doesn't do it. And the other Gospels add that wonderful line that after he doesn't step up and become a leader, he weeps for the missed opportunity. He weeps because he could have spoken up on behalf of Jesus and he didn't. He weeps because people were counting on him to lead and he didn't do it. He weeps because Jesus was willing to die and suffer on his behalf and Peter did nothing. And that would be a bitter tragedy if that was the end of the story, but fortunately, as we know, Peter was reinstated. He was forgiven. He was given another chance to step up and lead, and he did. All of us are presented with opportunities to lead, whether it's in our schools, in our work, in our church, or certainly in our community. And I'd say in this time and day, in our nation, we are given the opportunity to lead as followers of Jesus Christ. We are told, you can do this now. But often we step aside and say, it ain't me. Someone else can do it, but I don't know that I want to be the one who's going to protest. I don't know that I'm the one who wants to risk my job, risk my chance to get into college, risk my whatever it might be. It's someone else maybe. The beauty of Bob Dylan's change here is that he tried to deny it so much in those mid-60s, and yet the man for the past 50 years has still been speaking, still writing, and still leading, recognized with a Nobel Prize. He may have said no, but he was given time and time again more opportunities to step up and lead, and he did. And there will be generations of young people after us who will continue to listen to his words and be inspired not just to know what it means to love another person, but how to lead in our community and how to be a revolutionary in all of the ways we are called to be. And as Christians, we have the chance to do it again as well. We may have missed the mark in the past. We may have been unwilling to speak and unable to profess what it is we believe. My friends, there will be an opportunity again. And thank goodness Jesus Christ forgives us in such a way that we don't have to worry about failing and that being the once and for all. We get another chance. We get many more chances. Peter, when he's out there by the burning barrel, kind of staying warm with these people who are asking who he is, seems afraid because he's alone. I'm convinced if he had the other 12 with him, he might have been more willing to say, yes, I am a follower of Jesus Christ. That's what we have. We're not alone as a congregation. Go out there and be proud of what you believe, knowing that your brothers and sisters are standing right next to you. That it might be difficult at first, but you have someone who's going to back you up right there. We don't have to be afraid. We can be willing to lead. So therefore, speak boldly, lead recklessly, and serve with hope and grace for all people. Be willing to respond on behalf of the great I am. Yes, I am a follower of Jesus Christ. Let us pray.